Today we're gonna make muffins, but not just any muffin. We're gonna make cinnamon raisin muffins with the best streusel topping that you've ever had. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today's recipe for cinnamon raisin muffins is very easy, but there are some tips and tricks that you need to know about to get that perfectly domed muffin with this streusel topping that is crunchy and oh my gosh, so delicious. These muffins are absolutely the best. I promise you, you're gonna love them. And if you follow this technique, you're gonna have perfect muffins every time. First thing we're gonna do is get our crumble started. So in some sort of a shallow container, whether it be a plate even would work, or this is a breading tray that I'm using, put a half of a cup of all-purpose flour with a quarter cup of brown sugar, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and mix that together. Use a fork, it makes it pretty easy to do. So get that well combined so that all the cinnamon and the sugar is, dispersed evenly. Then we're gonna add 4 tablespoons of melted butter and create sort of like a paste. And the paste is going to be spread out over the bottom, and then we will put it in the refrigerator until we're ready for the crumble. Now, the great thing about muffins is you can make them in under 30 minutes. They use a quick bread type of recipe, meaning that they're not leavened with yeast. They are leavened with baking powder, in this instance anyway. Sometimes baking soda can be used. And it makes them really quick and easy to whip up. The other thing is you don't need any special equipment except your oven and some muffin containers and a bowl and a whisk and a fork. All right, so it's gonna get kind of goopy and pasty-like. Just mix it all up until you no longer see any flour. That is pretty important, so take your time and get all that flour incorporated. Now this is a different kind of technique for making a crumble. I tried, probably about 5 different varieties. And I had some problems with the crumble sinking into the muffin. I had some problems with it just not being crispy like I wanted. And this method worked perfectly. Don't know if you've ever seen it done quite this way, but it works perfectly. All right, so once I get all that spread out kind of evenly, it doesn't have to be perfect, just like that. Pop it in the refrigerator until we're ready for it, which probably will be about 15 minutes. Before we get started mixing up the muffin batter, make sure you preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That is super important. It needs to be hot when the muffins go in because that's gonna help them rise and create that nice dome on top. The way that you mix up your muffin batter really does make a difference. So don't try to take a shortcut here and just dump all the ingredients into the bowl and whisk it up. That is gonna create a tough batter, which results in dense muffins. So don't do that. You want 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour for this recipe in a medium-sized mixing bowl. Then we're gonna add in 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar and 1/2 cup of white sugar. Then you wanna add in 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And mix it together. Now you could use a spatula like this or you can use a whisk, whichever you want. But whisk it together so that it is completely combined so that all of the cinnamon and the brown sugar and the white sugar is dispersed evenly in the flour. If you have a few little lumps, don't worry about it. That's not gonna make any difference. All right, that looks perfect. Now we have 3/4 cup of whole milk. I do recommend using whole milk, not skim milk, but if you're in a pinch, you can substitute for the skim milk. 1 large egg, lightly beaten. 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. 2 tablespoons of a neutral flavored oil. And that's important. So you don't want to use olive oil, which is a heavier kind of oil and it does impart flavor. Use avocado or canola oil or vegetable oil, something like that. All right. I usually switch over to the spatula now because I can gently fold in the ingredients. Now we're gonna dump that in and dump the butter in. The reason why I don't add the butter, it's melted and kind of cooled, but the reason why I don't add it in to the other wet ingredients is because I've had it hit cold milk before and start to like, not crystallize, but firm up. We don't want that. We want it to be liquid. Put it in here and it does fine. That's 6 tablespoons of butter. When I first started testing this recipe, I was using all butter, but I did not get the texture that I wanted. They were just a little on the dry side. So it is important that you use both the butter and the oil. If you use all oil, you'll have a nice muffin, but it won't be as flavorful because butter adds that flavor. Now, you only want to turn this just the bare minimum to get everything mixed together. And I use like a folding technique. All right, that looks good. It's almost all incorporated. Now we're gonna add in 1 cup of raisins. You can use the dark raisins or you can use golden raisins. It's up to you. I personally like the darker raisins in this recipe. And then just gently fold. That is all we need to do. We are all done with our muffin batter. Now you wanna have some sort of a scoop or something to measure about 3 tablespoons of batter. We're gonna put 1 into each of the wells here. This recipe makes 12 muffins, standard size muffin liners or cupcake liners. And just get a nice scoop full. So it's probably a total of 3.5 to 4 tablespoons per muffin. This is a 3 tablespoon scoop, but you can see I let it go up above. Try not to get any on the muffin tray. I'll wipe that off because it'll just burn on there. All right, once you have that 3 to 3.5 tablespoons in each one of the wells, you may have a little left over, and that is fine. I just go in and look and see if there's any that are a little shorter than others and just equally disperse it so that they're all filled about the same, which is about 2/3 of the way up the muffin liner. Get every last raisin. All right, that looks good. Now, I'll wipe this off with a little paper towel. We'll get our streusel out of the refrigerator, get the streusel topping on the tops of these and get them in the oven. So don't fill your muffin liners any more than 2/3 of the way because we need room for that streusel topping. And when it rises up, you want it to stay on the muffin and not get stuck on the side. So we don't want to overfill our muffin cups for this recipe. Now, your streusel should be hard at this point and kind of sticking to the bottom. That's perfectly fine. That's how you want it. Now we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of white sugar. Just sprinkle that right over top. And then I'm using the same fork that I used before. Scrape the streusel off the bottom, and then we're gonna break it up into little pieces and combine it with this white sugar. This gives the most amazing crunch to the streusel. Oh my gosh, wait till you try it. And this does not just need to be used for this recipe for muffins. Anytime you wanna add a streusel topping, like to your apple pies, use this technique. It works. And this would probably be just about enough for a regular 9-inch pie. So you could just follow that same recipe. All right, that looks good. Now, if there's any bigger pieces like these, you can just break them up with your fingers. That's another reason that I like to add the sugar on later, the 2 tablespoons of white sugar after it's cold, because that helps prevent the butter from melting when you're crumbling it up, if you need to do it with your hands. So, works great. All right, that looks good. Now, we're gonna add about a tablespoon to each of the muffins. All right, there we go. Now we're ready to put both of these into the preheated oven 450 degrees for 5 minutes only. So don't walk away at this point. It's super important that at 5 minutes into baking, don't open the oven door, but adjust your temperature down to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 13 minutes. Once the muffins are done, put them on a cooling tray in the muffin pan for about 5 minutes. Then we will take them out and let them cool the rest of the way. And then we will open one up and give it a taste. All right, they have cooled down enough for me to taste one. The topping is nice. Can you hear that? Nice and crispy. Let's just unpeel it here. Now these muffins, you do not need butter or anything. They are so amazing. And moist. Oh my gosh, look at that. Wow, full of raisins and the flavors. Perfect. Oh my gosh. You are going to love these. Simple perfection.